Oh, I hit record and then my son came in. Hi, good morning. Sorry. It's always, even at early in the morning, it's always one of them around. Um,
Not here. Everyone's
yeah,
asleep.
yeah, nice. All right, Tom. Have you been on the pod? You have. I
I
mean, you've
have.
been in group discussions before.
I've
Have
been
we
a
done
group.
a
Yeah,
one-on-one?
we did a one-on-one. Also at a ridiculous early morning in the hour. I was on vacation. It was a year ago, June, I think, because
Okay.
it was on the book that finally just came out that I started
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
before COVID, and we
It
did a
was,
really cool
it was,
mother-daughter
yeah, it was on the train.
chat. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
remember the scene. That was a
But
really good
the
scene.
the mother-daughter thing was really helpful to
Nice. Very
because
cool.
I'm neither a mother
Yeah.
nor a daughter.
Can I put you on the spot and ask you to talk about the author service you're starting?
Yes,
I didn't clear that. I didn't clear that with you beforehand.
certainly. Well, what's funny is um, this is an interesting conversation for another podcast, but I have no interest in being famous. I mean,
Nice.
one of the things I love about writing is that you can be a famous author and nobody knows who you are,
Oh yeah, it's super
right?
true.
I
Yeah.
mean, unless you're Stephen King, but and then you have that choice to be like,
Yeah.
hey, by the way,
Yeah.
I wrote that such and such, and so I am a bookseller and an editor and a small publisher, and I've been doing that for about 10 years. But I also started writing novels about in 2017,
Yeah.
and as a lark. And so it's a long story, but basically, I wanted to learn how to do Amazon ads. And
Yeah.
so I was told they work better with a series, and none of my authors had a series. So I was like, all right, I'll write a series. And
Nice.
uh, I'm 52, and I'd started
You're
maybe,
52?
yeah,
I never would have guessed you're 52.
thanks.
I would have put you in your
Uh,
early 40s at best.
the hair is going quickly. Like it's a
That's
it's an upward ramp. It's really
yeah.
escalating.
That's
Um, also a different story. But my point, if I had one, yes, my point was that once I decided I wasn't going to write the great American novel and I was just going to do these silly books, it came out so easy and so fast. And if there were a way to
nice.
teach people to not give a shit about whether their writing was good, it would be great.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, yeah.
I haven't found
You
that.
haven't figured that out
Uh,
yet.
but anyway, so I just in addition to having my fifth novel come out in 2 weeks, I wrote this book called Write Your Novel,
Nice.
which is
It's an excellent book. I've read it. It's very
thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
And it basically distilled all the other writing books I'd read, including and stuff like The Dialogue Doctor and other things, and tried to crunch it all into 100 pages. And looking back on it, like the part one is like the real. Once the person starts writing, there's really not that much you can do until you get to editing.
Yeah.
but
Yeah, it's super true.
but it really focuses on prep without being a crazy over the top outliner, but not being a
Nice.
pantser either. So getting character voice, that kind of thing. But I didn't tell anybody that comes into my bookshop or anybody that I work with or anybody in my family except for the people in the
It's
household
so
that
funny.
not only that I had written Write Your Novel, but that I'd written any novels. Very
It's
few
really funny.
people outside of the writing Slack groups know that I've written any
That
novels.
really
So
is the best marketing tactic is to not tell anybody who would
yeah,
buy the book that you
it's
wrote
keeping my
books.
algorithm really pure.
Yeah, it's very
So
my awesome bots are the cleanest awesome bots in the world.
they are. Um, the so yes, I offer. I call myself like Reedsy, but it's just me because having worked with first time authors, they need to know everything.
Yeah.
And it's sort of become my niche. And I've just converted from being a publisher per se because everyone accuses you of being a scammer,
Yeah.
like AuthorNet and
Mhm.
not Publish America and all those ones, which are total scams.
Yeah.
But after being in these online groups, what I've really found out is that people still want someone who does the entire package.
They do.
They just want
Yeah.
it to be somebody that they can trust
Yep.
because they're getting scammed left and right.
Yeah.
But if you're on the message boards or whatever they call them these days,
Hmm.
uh, people are like, well, you can just hire your own cover designer and you can hire your own developmental editor and your own proofreader. And some of you out there are already seizing up in anxiety as I say this, right?
Yeah,
So
me
have it,
included. I'm like,
yes.
ah! Yeah.
So, I have,
Oh
I
man.
have customers who I do a developmental edit and they
Mhm.
give it back to me, and I do a content edit and they give it back to me, and I do a line edit and a proofread, and then I design them a cover, and then I get them in a room and we set up their KDP or the Ingram Spark account, and I show them
Yeah.
how it works, and then I create the ebook, and then they're done. And then 4 weeks later, they come back and they're like, "It's not selling. How do I do a Facebook ad?" And I can do that for them as well, which is
Nice.
why
That's awesome.
I do hourly, and most people do pay by page.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because and
We
what's
are
really
offering a lot more than just an
yeah
editing service. Yeah.
what's really fun and different is now that people in the right now that I'm getting clients from the writing community rather than my geographic community, because my geographic community is 80-year-olds who have always wanted to write a novel or write their memoir, which is
Yeah.
fine, which is
Yeah.
great.
I actually really love working with people who are like in retirement and are writing the novel of their dreams. It's a lot of fun because for
Yeah.
me, because they're willing to like live and craft with me a lot more than somebody who's like, I'm gonna crank this thing out.
Right. Well, and
Yeah.
that's the point I wanted to make, is that a lot of the people that previously hired me were already done and they wanted to be done. They're like, I've written
Hmm.
the book, I want to be done. And now I'm starting to get clients where it's a lot more developmental editing and separate rounds. And these are people who intend to write another book after this. So it's really about learning, which I love. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
doing more like, I've got a client right now that the first draft is so rough that it's actually coaching,
Nice.
which I hadn't done before, and it's really fun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Coaching's great.
it's stuff I've been doing for years, but I've really honed it down to the parts that I like best, and are
Very cool.
getting rid of the parts that I don't.
That's great,
Thank you
man.
for that. Hey, you just gave me a free plug, so please, if you're listening to this and are not a Patreon member for Dialogue Doctor,
Good
sign up
stuff.
now. I've edited 150 books, and I've learned more from this podcast than any
Thanks, man.
other educational venue. It's true.
Thanks. Thanks a
It's
lot.
totally true. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny.
Speaking.
I was super excited about the Patreon because I just put in new theme music to the bonus episodes, which I'm very that's always like my big like when I can figure something out because I don't really know how to do editing. So when I
Right.
figure something out, I'm like, yes. Yeah.
But the music for the regular podcast, I think
Hmm.
I've said this before. If you're listening at 1.25 or 1.5, that music just snaps. It is
Just yeah,
awesome.
spots.
I put it on. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna edit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was funny. Right after I started the podcast, I heard because I got the music from a site where you like pay for the rights for it, but you don't actually own the song. So right after I put the podcast up, I heard the music on an Allegra commercial. I was like, do I keep it? I was like, yeah, I'll outlast the commercial. But it was just
Yeah.
funny to hear, like, I guess I picked well if other people are picking it
Yeah,
too.
it's like
Yeah.
stock photos for covers. There's only so many like women holding a gun.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
you see it on like 20 different
Yeah.
uh, independently published books. There's this woman with short hair and a red dress, and she's holding the gun
Yeah.
out at arm's length.
Yeah. It's really funny.
Speaking of women, mine doesn't use a gun if they can help it.
Nice. Yeah.
It's actually a problem for covers.
Yeah, I always get in trouble for that because I write, you and I both write mystery thrillers.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a personal, I really do not like guns. I think partially because my first experience with guns is they were pointed at me. So I've always been like, I don't need those in my life. And I don't like them in my face. So, but I always get in trouble. I've actually had Amazon reviewers comment on my books. This could be really this could be really easily solved if you just give her a gun. I'm like, I'm not.
Yeah,
No,
it's like
I won't do it.
right.
Yeah.
It's like cell phones.
Yeah. Yeah. If she just had a cell phone, this would be super easy. Yeah. Or like if she just used the internet, this would be we could find this stuff out really quick. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about the piece. Give me an overview of what
Yeah, I
we're
hope it. You said 1,500 words, right? Because it seemed short, but I think we have plenty to talk about.
we have tons to talk about, and it's a great piece. And I usually do in a session like 1,500 to 3,000. So
Okay, great.
This
Well,
was great.
since I am outing myself, this is part of a series published under the name Stephanie Andrews, the Red Riley Adventure series, and this is book 5. So we know Riley, the main character, pretty well now. And in this book, she's from Chicago, but she's in VA case about a year after Hurricane Maria, and she and her boyfriend, who's a con artist, and they've come down there and they're just rebuilding. They're helping rebuild. They're just spending millions of dollars rebuilding because they're very Robin Hood types. And this scene is chapter 2. In chapter 1, she witnessed a shooting and got in a fight, and the guy she was fighting with was on a jet ski, and she was swimming and she almost drowned, and she's now sitting in the police station soaking wet. And the reason I wanted to do this chapter is there's the what are you calling pacing now?
Rate of exchange.
Rate of exchange.
Rate per exchange. Yeah.
Riley is in almost every exchange, but it's with 4 different people.
It is, yeah.
And she's also the first person narrator. So it's really like 5 relationships that are being managed in a very small scene. And I'm sure we'll get to this, but one of the things I found from your comments that was really useful was that I was purposely trying to use, I was purposely leaving out a lot of prose, but you seem to be suggesting that you've got to have pivots as she moves from person to person so that the reader doesn't get lost.
Yeah, and not just person to person, but segment to segment. So like if we're talking about, you've got, it's a really well done conversation, by the way. I really loved it. And it comes in like 3 blocks. First is Riley and Carlos, and then is Riley and this mystery man who kind of appears from the chief's office, and then the chief shows up, and you have Riley, the mystery man, and the chief, and then at the end we have this guy come walking in, Handy
Alejandro.
Handy, nice. Handy walks in at the end, and Handy is the and then you've got that's when you have the biggest conversation, and all throughout you have Riley's inner monologue running. I will say she's a great inner monologue character because she's, and I don't, you can tell me if this is true or not, because I just read this short piece, but in this short piece, she's very much managing her external presentation versus what's going on inside. So inside, she seems very like direct, to the point, and snarky, whereas externally, she's being more socially conscious. Is that true of her character?
Yeah, and you know, in the very first book, she was on the run, so she was by herself a lot. So the first person narrative really was helpful because she didn't have as many people to talk to. But this is book 5, and we know her pretty well, and she is snarky, but she has been in many situations where she has to pretend to be someone else. And so she's pretty good at presenting herself to other people, even though it often goes really wrong. I mean, the books are meant to be comedic.
Yeah.
And so there's this sort of Fletch-like aspect of like, there's often places where she gets called on for not even trying to pull something off, you know what I mean? When she's just lying. And so yeah, that's her interior monologue is snarky, but it's also, she's very self-conscious. And through this particular book, she's very self-conscious about her boyfriend and her best friend are starting to call her on destructive behavior, which you don't see here. But as the book, you know, this was written during Nano, and you're like, I don't have a theme. I'm just writing
I'm just pounding
it out. And you get to the end, and you're like, this entire book is about her death wish.
I'm sure this isn't the case with you having a death wish, but typically when I pound out a book like that, I'm like, oh, I must be going through this. I find the theme, and I'm like, oh, look at that.
Yeah,
I'm struggling with that as well.
For me, it's logic, because I am like incessantly logical. So I'm writing this book, and I'm thinking, like, there's no way her friends would watch her go through all this without getting mad. Right?
Yeah.
There's no way her boyfriend would not want her to not be blowing
Yeah,
things up
a
and being
healthy,
shot at.
yeah, a healthier
Right.
person. Yeah,
So
yeah, that's really funny. Um, that's, I mean, it sounds like a great theme and really fun. Um, okay, so let's just start taking it through a piece of, is there anything specific besides like looking at like pros in the segments? Is there anything specifically you wanted to talk about?
uh yes, because I'm now, thanks to this podcast, which you should subscribe to on Patreon at the highest possible level, I am now super aware of tone and
Yeah,
voice.
yeah,
And there's a few places because of that I end up putting in a dialogue tag that describes the tone, because I can't
yeah,
figure out how to just have the tone be evident in the dialogue, if that makes
yeah.
sense.
So let's start there. So you're talking about like right here is one that you marked. There's one
Yeah.
before too
Yeah, there's,
that
I
I
noticed
found.
it as I was going back
Yeah, here
through,
we
and I
go.
was like, huh. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's do both of these. So we're in the middle of a conversation with is this with the
This
pretend
is with
the
Kane, yeah,
Kane?
and
Yeah.
he's like, he's like Orson Welles.
Yeah.
He's a overbearing, rich, sententious
Yeah.
asshole. Yeah.
So you've got you've got a nice build here. So the first thing she says that I'm going to start with is, I'm not sure what you mean. I interjected innocently. And then about 3 exchanges later, you say, exactly who are you again? My voice was less innocent this time. And then like 4 exchanges after that, you say, of course you do. I said, did you know the guy on the jet ski? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. So you've got this like her putting on this innocent voice and then later becoming a little more aggressive and then really trying to like contain what's going on internally. And there's this like, what you were commenting on is getting rid of these like adjectives like innocently, innocent this time, and keeping my tone neutral.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I find, first off, there's nothing wrong with this writing.
No.
This is fine writing.
Thanks.
It's good. Yeah, it's I think when we get into these questions about like how do I get rid of this, how do I get done with this, I think it has to do with like our personal style and
Right.
what we want it to look like.
But if I just get rid of those, like the things that are highlighted on the screen right now,
Yeah, you can't, it
they
changes the
could
emotional
go
tone.
right, but they
Yeah.
could go away from an understanding, from a like a logical point. But then
Yeah,
we wouldn't quite know what her.
well, we wouldn't feel it, right?
Right.
Like dialogue serves that two side purpose, which part of it is like getting across the communication, but then part of it also is getting across the emotional resonance. So if we lose those little words, we lose the emotional resonance. I'm sorry. I'm gonna pause for 1 second and tell my kid to stop turning up his video game. Give me 1 sec. Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry. This is life with children and working from your home. Yeah, so we have these, you can't lose them because you lose the emotional feeling. And part of what makes this really rich is Riley's emotional experience through these conversations, right? Which are doing really well. So we want to keep that emotional tone. So if you don't like just describing the emotional tone, I think there's 2 different ways. One is to start describing her internal feelings. So, meaning her like physical internal feelings. So, how would you say when you're saying like she's trying to control her, she loses control of her voice a little bit, and then now she's like less innocent, and then she tries to pull it back as trying to remain neutral. What would you say the emotion she is experiencing is?
Frustration. She'll be clenching.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Teeth gritting, kind of
Nice.
wanting to physically punch the guy in the face.
Nice. Okay. So, and I think there's a couple different ways to like maintain that. Ideally, is this something she experiences often?
Yeah, there's sort of a repeat of this scene later in the book, and her
Nice.
friend is in an earpiece, and her friend's like, "Oh boy, she's gonna pop. Uh-oh, she's gonna pop," and then and then at the end of the scene, she pops. She just like,
Nice.
yeah. So this is sort of a light preview of that, and
Okay.
but she gets frustrated, and her pretense falls away.
Nice. Okay.
So in this one, I don't want the pretense to fall away
Yeah, she pulls
because,
it back.
well, Handy comes in, he's like, "Hey, everybody, how's it going?"
Yeah.
So he's like Shaggy, he just sort
Yeah.
of
This was funny.
diffuses a scene.
Yeah. So yeah, he's actually really good. We'll look at him in a minute. He's a good like, um, especially in mysteries, you got to have that character that comes in and just like removes, mostly so that you don't like. You have to have that character that comes in and removes all of the tension and suspense, so that you don't like let it all loose too early.
Right. I was gonna, so
Yes.
you can start over again,
Yeah,
start building again.
so you can start over, and you can give your detective a break. So you can be like, okay, I'm gonna go. Yeah. Um, so one way to do that would be to build a system of physical. I don't. The word ticks comes to mind, but that's not what it is. It's a progression of physical things that um you use whenever she's frustrated. So, and it's part of her voice modulation, and that like, body language, internal and external, is part of our
Right.
voice, especially if other people can see it. So
So it's a physical
it's
modulation,
a
really.
physical modulation. So like I would say like, clenching her fists works well. Like you were saying, like gritting her teeth. Gritting her teeth is probably, I would say, a stage 2 of ramp up, because people can feel it. That you want the first one to be internal so that nobody sees it. So the first one can be like, I got that pain in my gut again, or I got that knot in my throat, or I got that, my head started to pound.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
she does that a little bit where she's
Yeah.
like, why does this guy piss me off from the get-go?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is
And my wife, I affectionately call my wife a rage monster, because she has that. She loves it, by the way. It's a term of endearment, but she has that like 0 to 60, like, any second here she comes. I think part of it just comes from her like Italian heritage, is this the like she grew up in the like, loud and uh, stereotypical Italian household in some ways. But she's got that like, I'm gonna pop, and I can see it coming in her. And the first thing that happens, well, the first thing I see, she says, what happens is she starts to get tense. Like she can feel her body getting tense. And then I know it's coming when she raises an eyebrow. When she raises an eyebrow, I'm like, whoo, all right, let's back off. Everybody back. I'll actually say to my
she's gonna
kids,
pop.
yeah, we'll sit in the kitchen and she'll raise an eyebrow and I'll start going, danger, danger, danger.
Yeah, that's what
Yes.
I'm looking for. So,
Yes.
and I want more than like clenched fist because it's so cliche.
Yeah.
So
And what
I'll search around for that. Yeah, but that's
Yeah, and whatever you can imagine for her, making it as unique to her as possible is like, but
right.
getting those tells in, the 3-beat progression here you have is really nice, because you can see that like, okay, this is the start of it. Here it comes, and then in an explosive situation, that 3rd beat you want her to pop.
Mhm.
But in this one, she's going to pull it back. So you also need to give her something to do physically that allows her to pull it back, like, taking deep breaths. Um, I wouldn't have her fiddle with something. That's more of a like anxious person's
Mhm.
thing. But a lot of times, if you're writing an anxious
Right.
person, they'll fit. I used to keep a little, like, I always used to keep Legos in my pocket that I would play with when I got anxious. But so anything you can give her that like is her own soothing coping mechanism to like pull things down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll probably be like breathing through the nose or something from martial arts.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be great. So I think you can, that's one way you can replace these like describing of the things. And if you
Mhm.
can build in that system, it becomes intercommunication between you and the reader, where the reader's like, oh, I've seen this. I know what's about to happen. Here she comes. And then you can play with that someone, like here you are pulling it back. The other way to do it is to give her self-talk, because you're in the first person narrative, is to do that like, um, uh, I'm not sure what you mean. I interjected, drop a period there. I was really working hard to keep my voice. Like even
Yeah.
though this guy was pissing me off, I was really working hard to keep my voice under control. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you gonna say? I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I do that some, but like I said, I was pulling back a little bit in this because I felt like there was so much going on
There
that
is a lot.
that
Yeah.
I wanted it to be sort of a snappy. I'm snapping for the people on.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a snappy back and forth between multiple, multiple people where you can almost see her jerking or, like talking to
Yeah.
that person, talking to that person, talking to that person. And I didn't want to slow it down, but there are, but a lot of your comments were, hey, slow it down because the reader's not going to
Yeah,
necessarily
well,
follow along.
I think we want to slow it to give that emotional pull to
Yeah.
it. And
Well,
here I would be okay for you to take like just a short beat, like a sentence,
mhm.
and be like, especially since her inner monologue serves as another voice in the scene. I don't think it'll necessarily slow it down if you write it in that like one short sentence to the reader, like, God, I hate this guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like it doesn't pull us out too much. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, you're right though. It does slow it down some, but I think it's okay. But again, we get into these questions like, is it wrong that my voice was less innocent this time? There's nothing wrong with that. It's
Okay.
just about style and how like artfully you want to play with stuff. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump up to the top and work our way through. Yeah, so your opening description is good. I know where I am and I know my scenery. I'm not sure so when we come into an opening like this, we want to know like where we are and what's on the stage of the reader's mind. Like what's the props on stage? And you get the props really solid. We want to know who's in the room. You get who's in the room really good. Like we're talking about Carlos in the third paragraph. That's great. We want to know what the conflict is, and we get the conflict pretty soon, coming down a little like right around when they start talking. We get the conflict in. Um, but emotional tone is the one that we don't get right away, and I think understanding where she's at emotionally in these opening paragraphs would make this pop even more,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you can do that as you describe the police station, telling us how she feels about being in here. Right.
Mhm.
So this opening description, the little police station was made of cinder blocks, so it had weathered Hurricane Maria fairly well. I mean, everything inside the station had been destroyed, computers, telephones, files, but the building itself was fine. It was one of the buildings to be refurbished and resupplied.
So what if I move the exchange in front of that to show that her emotional her state right then is that she's tired and frustrated right from the get-go.
Yeah,
I like starting scenes with dialogue. Some people don't, but
I do too. I do too. It's
so if she starts
either,
with "Come on, I want to go home. It's nearly midnight."
yeah, either way, I want to know how she feels about the police station, because you told me about the police station.
Right.
Like, and you've got this line, it was one of the first buildings to be refurbished and resupplied. How does she feel about that?
Mhm.
Because that doesn't just comment to the emotional tone of the scene, because the environment that we sit in and how we feel about that environment impacts our relationships with others in real life.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, I learned this, I think, from Chris Kane, but that I've been trying to use relentlessly since, which is that your descriptions should be
Yeah.
descriptions that mean something to the character and not just the room was blue, but
Yes.
like the
Yeah.
room was my favorite color.
Yeah.
Just the description should tie, and yeah,
Yeah.
so
And
I'll
that's what I'm
I'll I'll
getting, like,
figure that out.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm getting at, is like, you've got this great description of where she is, and then this great description of how she physically is feeling. But I don't know in a larger sense what this room means to her,
Mhm.
or yeah, or how. And you know, if she's in a place that she feels comfortable and safe, which she's clearly not as I read on, but if she's in a place where she feels comfortable and safe, it means one thing. If she's in a place that's representative of the misuse of funds in hurricane relief, she feels is the misuse of funds in hurricane relief, it means something else. It adds to her like frustration in the moment. If she's in a place that feels to her like an energy suck, like the first of Joe versus the volcano, which is a reference everyone will understand. She's she's
I know he can get the job, but can he do the job?
she's she's gonna feel like we get a completely different feeling. So tying that in there I think is gonna make that really strong. Um, I want these on the same line. Carlo looked over at me from high school. Sorry, Carlo looked over at me from his high school, from his high.
High
Why am I saying
school.
school? Ugh,
Because it's early.
ugh. Carlos, I wish that that were the case. Carlos looked over at me from his high stool behind the counter. I'm sorry, Riley, but Captain really wants to see you before you go home. I really want those on the same line because they're the same. Um, that's his dialogue tag in
Right.
essence. Yeah. Um, and I did do a double take when I read this as his like entrance, and then I read this on a different line. I was like, wait, did somebody else say that? I was like, no, that's him.
Right. You
But
want it
yeah,
to, it is a tag. Right.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, okay. So you use Carlos's name a lot. She keeps saying Carl. I've already
Yeah.
told you everything, Carlos. Um, there's another one
Yeah.
down here. Yeah.
That's something I would probably fix in later drafts, but
Okay.
it's
I didn't
nice
know
to
if it
have
was
I see it.
intentional.
No,
I
it's
wanted
nice
to
to have it
ask.
point out.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. Just that I just wanted to make it clear that she already knows the local cops.
Okay. So, this time this isn't for you. I know you know this, but for people listening, we only use like you don't only use using somebody's name in a sentence, Tom,
Yeah.
uh, brings emotional weight to the sentence. So, Tom, you only want to do it when Tom, you're really trying to emphasize that person's role in the sentence, Tom. Because you can feel like as I keep using your name, it like brings this like kind of like fist to it.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I
yeah,
get that completely.
yeah.
Uh,
And that fist, just to say, like that fist can go in a positive or negative way. Like if you're really building intimacy in a scene, using somebody's name in a sentence can like exaggerate that intimacy. In this scene, because she's a little irritated, using his name feels like she's going, Carlos.
yeah.
Like so, which if
Right.
intentional is a great tool, but I could tell it
Yeah.
wasn't. Yeah.
No, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's interesting that one of the things I'm trying to work on is remembering the reader. You know, you talk about reader burden, but
yeah.
I noticed something as you were talking on this. A few paragraphs down, she says something that's grammatically incorrect, and I have gotten so many dings on reviews
Have
saying,
you really?
"Oh yeah, this story was cute, but it could use an editor." There's so many places where she said where they used you and I, and you know, you don't respond to reviews, but I'm like,
See,
she's a 33-year-old former cop from Chicago. She might say you and I instead
yeah.
of you and me.
Yeah. Hey, writers, don't review other people's books like that.
I know.
That's a writer. That's a writer review right
Oh, I
there.
know,
That's
but
a
it's
writer being like, I just went through and removed all of my U
right.
and I's. Yeah. Don't do that. Don't be that person on Amazon reviews. Yeah. Okay. So I want more of a back and forth here.
Mhm.
Carlos says, I've already told you everything. It's not like I'm a flight risk. I pulled the scratchy blanket around me. The two officers who brought me in had the decency to let me put my shirt and shorts on. But since my bathing suit was underneath, it felt soggy all over. So she says this like, it's not like I'm a flight risk, which is a phrase of pushing back, right? Like if you think about the dialogue as this like dance between two people, when expectations align, they come together. When expectations contrast, we push against each other. She's pushing him back, right? With that statement of like, hey, I don't know why you're doing this to me. She's like, what you're bringing to the conversation isn't meeting my expectations, so I'm pushing you away emotionally. But you said early on that you want them to feel like they have this ease with each other. So we need to see him blow that off.
Right.
In not in a mean way, but in like a, friendly,
You know, I
like,
can't. Yeah, doing my
yeah,
job.
yeah,
If it
yeah,
were if you're up to me, you'd be home by now.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Or even teasing her and being like, I don't really want you in here either. Right.
Right.
Something that's like,
Yeah.
but you got to communicate in body language, like the sly grin or something like that,
Uh-huh.
that like gives the like, okay, they're friends. Yeah. Um, type. And this is a good place to define that relationship
Yeah. Because
between
she
them.
is annoyed because, you know, one of the things when you become a vigilante, bureaucracy gets even more annoying. You're like, I don't have to. Why do I have to put up with this crap?
Super true. Yeah. From all my vigilante days, I know that to
Yes.
be true. Yeah. It's really funny. Yeah. So, and then I really liked this. Um, yeah. Oh, so this was the line that I would probably give to him. Like, if he knows her really well, he might comment on the fact that she's absolutely a flight risk.
Yeah,
Right?
which is actually more, I think, more freighted than what you're saying, because it has to do with money.
Yeah.
Like there are
Oh,
people on the island who can't leave because they've
okay.
lost everything.
So yeah,
So
that may not be a friendly thing to say.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it could be a friendly sort of like slap down.
Yeah. Well, it
Right.
could be like a, hey, when you run, take me with you. Right. Like that would be
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's a good place to sort of layer that in, I
Yeah.
think. So.
Yeah. Here's just because we were talking about names earlier, I do want to point out this line because you used the name really well here. I mean, even if I were a flight risk, I wouldn't run on you, Carlos. Right. Like that's a
Mhm.
good use of his name because it like emphasizes the emotion there. Oh, you had this really great interchange here, which I has that like you're talking about building that nice energy. This has really nice energy, and between like getting those like back and forth utterances between the characters, and also has that a really great turn here that I was like, oh, Tom, well done. So thanks, I said glumly, no problem. Anything else I can do for you, just say it. Martina Escobar is my aunt. See, is she? I smiled. I said, smiling. I hadn't realized. Through your mom? No, my poppy is her cousin. I don't think that makes her your aunt. Now, my temptation as a writer is to keep describing the relationship.
Yeah.
That's not very realistic, right? Like that's not
Right.
how we talk to each
But
other.
I do that plenty. So
Yeah.
I do that a lot.
Yeah, but here you didn't hear. She
Yeah.
says you could walk on water as far as she's concerned.
He says that. Yeah.
Yeah, he says that. Yeah, which is a great like. She makes this kind of snide comment, and he just totally just doesn't respond, which is
Uh,
great.
I don't know where I learned it. I like to think I learned it from you, but over the past,
I will take
yeah,
the credit.
over the past few years in editing, and especially in my own work, I try to make like one out of every four exchanges be not a direct follow on, because that's not how people talk.
It's not how people talk. Yeah.
Especially if you have two characters whose whose desire for the scene is misaligned, so
Yeah.
they want separate things. Like, just listen to the every third or fourth sentence, someone's going to say a complete non sequitur that is more about what they had wanted to get in, right? Like,
Yeah.
you may be telling me something, but I want to tell you this.
Yeah. But I want to tell you this. Yeah.
And it makes it go fast too. I think it gives it a sort of a
It does. It gives it a like, I don't need to comment on that because we both know what I would say. So it just keeps like moving on. It's also a great, just this is just an aside, but it's also a great note to use with a narcissistic character. When you're writing a narcissist,
They're going
they
to do it even more.
they rarely stay on the topic that
Right.
you want them to stay on. Everything goes back to what they wanted to talk about anyway. So it's yeah, but it's a fun technique to use, and it definitely creates a like, oh, I'm hanging out with two friends. Um, yeah, the show, like if you want to watch examples of it in a like show which are fast and easy to consume, Seinfeld does it really well. They
Mm-hmm.
rarely are having the same conversation. And part of that is their narcissistic tendencies of all the characters on the show, but
Right.
they never respond to what everybody's saying, but the conversation still makes sense. Like you can follow them
Exactly.
all. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
this is
pa-
a very Jerry thing to do. The like,
Parents.
I don't think
Yeah.
that makes her your aunt. That's a very like, and then you can just see George like just rattling through whatever he was saying anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Parents definitely do that too. Like,
Yeah. Oh,
oh, you said that, and I'm gonna keep going with what I was gonna say anyway. Because
yeah. Yeah, I just did it a second with my kid here. I was like, "Hey, turn on your video game," and he was like, "But the headphones don't work." I was like, "Turn it down." Like, okay.
did you they just dropped the trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy number 3,
Oh,
and
I haven't watched it yet.
there's a after the title card, they always tag on a little conversation, and the conversations in those movies are great.
Oh, they're
But
fantastic.
it's Peter and Drax, and Drax is just not listening to, or he's listening to him, so he keeps modulating with it. You've got to watch it to see, but it's this like
Oh,
it's like these six exchanges really rapid fire back and forth where
that's awesome.
Peter's trying to get him to acknowledge something, and he just keeps modulating what he's saying a little bit.
That's really funny.
It's great.
Did you watch the holiday special?
I didn't, but I heard it was fabulous.
Oh man, talk about great dialogue. There is a scene. Fast forward 30 seconds if you don't want to hear this. There's a scene with Drax and Mantis and Kevin Bacon in a ship, and they're talking about they realize Drax and Mantis realize in the ship that he's not actually a hero, that he just plays a hero on television. And Kevin Bacon is trying to explain how that brings joy to people. And Drax is just looking at him saying things like, I hate you. It's the funniest. It's the most hysterical. Mantis is also not listening to him because their personalities, their voices do that all the time. Where it's
Mhm.
like Drax is so self-absorbed that he's not listening to anybody. Mantis is so like naive and a little slow to pick up on things that she's like stuck like 3 beats back. So it is the funniest conversation as
That's
Kevin
great.
Bacon tries to navigate these two weirdos. It's so funny. Um, but and their reactions are just like they're doing this over and over again because he's like, "You're an actor, ew, gross." And he's like, "No, no, you don't understand. Like acting, brings people joy and love, and it's a fun thing." And Drax is like, "I didn't know you were an actor. Actors are the worst." And it's just like, why are you guys 3 beats behind in the conversation? It's so great. Anyway, um, highly recommend. Yeah. Anything else you wanted to talk about with that
Uh,
amazing transition you
no,
wrote? Okay.
yeah, no. We go through Carlos, and then Kane comes out.
Yeah. I really liked how you're using her inner voice here. This is fun. So, I blushed a little. We didn't do that much. More than anyone else, I got her fresh water and her electricity. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel good to be recognized for good works. Man, I cannot read today. So that like I like that. And then she says, "Well, I said my bike is still down at Baladin?
Bladen. It's
Bladen.
just the
Yeah.
beach.
Do you think someone could give me a ride?" So I like how she feels good in her internal monologue, but then in her external monologue, she pushes that out and makes the transition. It was nicely done. I would give her more of a transition than well. Um, I'd probably have her say well and then have him come back with another. Like I want one more beat here to kind of live in her uncomfortable getting complimented. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
That feeling of getting a compliment and being uncomfortable with that compliment is a fun emotion. And it's nice to pull at it a little bit. So I might take one more beat there. I don't know though. It's again, when you give me a piece that's good, Tom, it becomes just me nitpicking at things. Um So how was your session with Jeff? He just picked at things and he said he'd say something and then he'd immediately take it back. It was really weird. Um, yeah, so here I added a couple words um just to confirm that why was I confirming this? Yeah, to confirm that they're on the same page because so this is a transition in a segment, right? We were talking about his aunt. And now we're going to start talking about how she's getting out of here. And he says, I get off at 2 and then I ride no problem. She thinks about how long that would make her sit in the station. And then and then he says, and he reads her facial expressions and says, You're
Right.
right. Carlos said, answering the comment I hadn't made. I bet Tia Martina could come down and give you a ride home. I want him just to acknowledge that she thought that. Just
Okay.
to show that like she is on her page, like you're here too long. Yeah. Otherwise it leads to potential miscommunication of like, oh, maybe her face meant she didn't want to ride with me. Like maybe that's like maybe so Just
Okay. Yeah, I got
yeah,
that. I get you.
just clear in intentions. Um, yeah, this is just me having a good time because you jump into this little section about how old she is, which is really funny. She's like, I raised an eyebrow. She drives. She's only 88. And then he had said ever since she got the new glasses, she's been good to go home. That's a really funny joke. So I just wanted to stay there for a minute. And I added the line, oh, well, she's only 88. But just that's just entertaining for me. There's nothing else there besides me just playing around. Um, okay, before we get into Kane, any other thoughts on the Carlos conversation?
No, that's good. It's a little clunky because I retconned them being friends. So in the first draft they weren't, but then later I
Yeah,
needed he and his wife for something. So then I went back and made it more friendly, but
yeah.
it's a little clumsy.
Oh,
I'm gonna
Carlos and I are
clean
buds
it up.
now.
Right.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's clumsy. I think it's really good. I really liked it. I got that they're like at ease with each other. They're joking at each other. Even though she's really frustrated, she seems more relaxed, and he kind of plays that off with her, which was
Mm-hmm.
it was a nice change. Um, so then here you have this really nice to start the new segment and introduce the new character. You have a really nice description of this man coming in and who he is. And then you back Carlos away, which is nice. As the man strode toward me, Carlos melted away like a phantom, leaving me alone in the glare of the man's piercing blue eyes. So I like that you do this because it removes Carlos from the conversation. So now in the big cast conversation, you don't have to deal with Carlos anymore. You like shuffle him off the stage, which is great. Um, Here, though, you have this line: I shook his hand, causing the blanket to fall over my right shoulder and revealing my Cubs t shirt that was soaked through where my bathing suit was, meaning where my breasts were. Um, Later, you note him looking at her boobs.
Yeah.
I think if this is going to make her to really sell this, if this is going to make her uncomfortable, you've got to hit it now.
Yeah, I don't it's less that I want to make her uncomfortable that I want to label him as a bad care as a perv.
Yeah.
Like as her like it's and one thing reading through this I want to touch on a little bit is that she has sort of a historical resentment to the wealthy and also to authority. So when the captain comes out, she's not buddy with the captain like she is with
Yeah,
Carlos.
that's very
And
clear.
one of the things that happens through the book is the captain is a good guy,
Okay.
and so she sort of they become friends
Yeah.
over the course of it. But at the beginning, she's not. And just yeah, I was just looking for a quick, short way to have her be like, I instantly hate this man.
Yeah, I would add so this is a good place to add pros because we're in between segments, right? Like we're moving
Mm-hmm.
into a new segment where they're going to talk about his name and who he is. So you have the ability here to add more exposition um without slowing anything
Down.
down.
Right.
Yeah. So I would give him a look. If you're going for him being a perv, I would give him a look here where he's actually like glaring down at her and making her feel
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. I think it could be a really nice moment. But yeah, anyway, that was just because I will say I didn't get from him that he's a perv until he actually looks at her down here in the
Mm-hmm.
last. So I'd bring it right out right away. And then I'd also have her um pulling like she,
Responding.
she has this response. I felt myself reddened, but finished the handshake and then drew the blanket closer around my shoulders. I'd have her do that in response to his like glare.
Glare. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, this is great. Their conversation about his name, Vincent Kane, like Michael Caine. No, he said like Charles Foster. I tried to mask the facts that I didn't know who that was, but he could tell. Citizen Kane, he said, looming over me. I also love what you're doing with her voice in that, like, she has these inner thoughts, but everybody knows what she's thinking on the outside, which is really great. You do that 3 times, which is where she's like, I'm trying to hide this,
Right.
but Carlos is like, okay, I could get so and so to drive you, right? Like, and here she's like, Citizen Kane, right? Like, it's just really nicely
Mm-hmm.
done. Um, yeah, so we talked about these. these
Yeah.
getting rid of the innocent things. Um, here I just wanted to I wanted to use, so he says, Kane matched Ramos in his own shitty grin. Why do I dislike this guy on the spot? Was it my spidey sense? Of course, he said, looking down at his feet with an aw shucks tip of the head. My family had been there for generations, so I'd been helping a long time. You had spidey sense vindicated, asshole. I just want to know what it is that she sees. Because I didn't clearly get that, like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's, you know, he's claiming sort of ancestral benefactor role, right?
Oh,
Like
see, I even read it wrong.
my
Yeah.
family has been here for generations. He's calling
Oh,
her a carpetbagger, basically,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because they're coming in and they're rebuilding things for cheap, and he is trying to make money.
Got it. That's interesting. See, I played off of the all shucks nod, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, the fact
No,
that
because
he's this fancy dude.
he's doing that foghorn leghorn kind of like,
Yeah,
well, little lady, you're doing a great job. We're all helping each other here, right? But my family's been helping longer because I'm a better person than you are. So
gotcha,
that's, yeah. So it's that overly smooth, friendly, like kill you
gotcha.
with kindness, which for her is like poison. Like she
Yeah,
hates that, right?
yeah,
So okay, yeah, I can clean that up. I can make that more
yeah. I
explicit.
just give her a line of inner thought
Yeah.
that's like, and again, it won't slow it down because her inner thought
Right.
is a character in the.
Yeah, but also change him a little bit. Um,
I might make it a
yeah,
little more clear with him. That's the other way to go, is to make his line even more like, you could use italics on the my. To make I said with pain in my voice to make his line even more. Yeah. Okay, so here we have an end of a segment where they're gonna change kind of emotional tone, and Captain Ramus is gonna come in. I'm sorry, Captain Ramus is already in. They're changing emotional tone, and they're changing kind of direction of the conversation. As I said, it was stolen, but you seem to know the man in the sunfish, or you think you might. Kane gave me that stupid smile again. I think you misunderstood my question. Did I? I glanced over at Carlos, who was behind the counter pretending to read something on the monitor. I was told no body was found. So this, I glanced at Carlos, is great. One, because you keep him in the scene.
mm-hmm.
You're like, hey, he's still
and
here.
he's like, I don't want it.
Yeah, he's still here, but he's not going to talk because he's hiding in the back.
Right.
But just to remind everybody, like, Carlos is still in the room. But
But you're
this is,
saying bring Ramos in,
yeah,
like Ramos would probably try to end that escalating.
He's going to say something.
Like, hey.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And by bringing in Carlos here, you change the emotional tone because she's taking a beat.
Mm-hmm.
So when she takes a beat, it's like taking an emotional breath. And then she comes back with, I was told no body was found. So give me Ramos here to wrap up the segment.
Okay.
Also, we haven't really had Ramos. It's been 4 or 5 exchanges since we had him. So just to pull him back in. Yeah.
Yeah. Although the reason she's looking at Carlos is because he's clearly the one who told her.
Oh yeah, no, I totally got that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I totally got that. But since he's over there hiding in the corner and isn't a part of the actual conversation. Yeah.
No, it makes sense that Ramos would step in there and try to keep Riley from popping.
Yeah, well, especially here since he takes over, right?
Yeah.
Like he takes over for Kane at this point. When she says there was no body found, he's now answering the questions, right? Like there hasn't been.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a nice transition there. Here's another one. I want to know how Kane feels in response to her question. Again, this is the end of a segment. Well, it was nice to relay my description to him, of him to Mr. Kane, considering he's. What's your involvement in this again? I asked Kane, turning back and looking up at him. So she asks this like question of like, who in the hell are you?
Yeah, exactly.
And he's like, and then looks to him for a response. But then you have Handy interrupt before we actually see how he responds.
Mm-hmm.
So give us because she would have seen his in like real life, or if we had made this into a movie, we all would see his physical response. So give him that like, bullshit smile again. Yeah. Maybe a shrug this time. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Something of like, Yeah. He doesn't need to talk. He just needs that physical. Um,
You're right. I want the door opening to interrupt them, but that doesn't mean we wouldn't see
we'd see him.
their
Yeah.
response. Right. We'd see him
Yeah. It it
when they make the
saves
movie.
it
When.
saves him from when the movie is fought over between multiple streaming services. Um, yeah, he's why are we saying a movie? This is
This is
clearly
a TV show.
a
I mean,
seasonal.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're on book 5. This is
Yeah.
clearly a
This
TV
is
show. It's
we're in
been
like
cast in my head already.
yeah,
So.
we're in like season 7 by this book of Netflix. Um, so yeah, here uh yeah, so giving him that like physical response, but you do a great job of bringing the bell in to save him from vocalizing a response.
Mhm.
He doesn't actually have to, yeah. Not that he would, because this is clearly somewhere where Ramos would be like, "What are you doing here? What is anybody doing here?" Right? Like, yeah. So, um, and again, I felt like when you have Handy walk in, Ramos is going to take control of the situation here again. He's going to be
Yeah.
the first one to talk, which is just power dynamics, right? Like she's clearly in charge of the conversation because she's got the greatest desire to figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The other 3 men in the room, including Carlos, really just kind of want her to leave. So because she's there, she has the biggest, like she's running the conversation, and because of who she is, because of her
Right.
personality. But you need
And
to bring in this like battle between the captain and her of who's actually in charge of what's going on here.
yeah, especially and also the captain doesn't want to upset Kane, and Riley thinks it's
Yeah.
because he's a sycophant, but it's because he's running his own investigation.
Yeah, that's a
Which you
nice
don't find
twist.
out till later, right? So he does not want Riley and Kane mixing it up. So he would step in there
Yeah.
and sort of control the conversation a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and just in the emotional tone of what Riley's doing here, she's going to be pissing him off because she's like pressing all of the buttons. So you can almost see him like snapping at Handy as Handy comes in.
Right.
Like, oh, great. You're here now, too. Right. Like,
yeah.
What is this? Grand Central? Like, why are all these people coming into my police station tonight? Yeah. So just letting him have that like moment when Handy comes in, and it'll play nicely with her if she's nice to him.
Right. She's like, hey,
right?
Handy.
Hey, Handy, what are you doing here? Yeah. If you wanted her to be biting, you could be like, hey, Handy, what are you doing here? Do you know Mr. Kane? Do you know why Mr. Kane is here? Right? Like it's that kind of like if you want her to keep
no,
pressing,
it's more, I'm trying to think of it. There's plenty of examples in like TV shows, but like it's gonna be irritating to the captain that Riley has a better relationship with everybody on the island than he does.
Yeah, than he does. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. This was really nice. Do I know you as Kane? You hired me last week, said Handy, not put off. Alejandro, I'm not going to try to say his last name because I don't speak Spanish. I'm going to crush that.
I don't either, but it would be Quesada.
Yeah. Quesada, thank you. To work at the gala, Kane smiled his smile. I like that you've attributed to him this, like, he has a smile.
Yeah.
And I was already sick of it. That's just a great line. Yeah, here we need a bigger segment transition. So because we're again switching topics, you're wrapping up, the emotional tone is changing a little bit from, I would describe Riley's emotional movement as being like aggressive where she's poking. Then when Handy comes in, she kind of gives up. She's kind of like, all right, we're done here for a minute. But then at this moment here, she becomes this like curious again, and she's jumping back into the curiosity. So I'd give her just a little bit bigger beat to make that shift, right? Where you've got, of course, forgive me, I hired many people last week for the gala. It's going to be impressive. Yes, Mr. Ramos said, clapping his hands together. I thought I might roll over and I thought he might roll over and pant at any minute. Mr. Kane is doing wonders for the economy. Gala, I asked despite myself. This didn't seem the time for luxury. So I might add one more thing in here about her debating whether or not to touch it. just something. And then let Handy comment here at the end of the segment, because he is the one that they were talking about being hired. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And if he comments, he's going to shut down her curiosity because he's the cooler. So he's going to bring it down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, except I want her to, yeah, I mean, I want her to be curious about the gala though.
Yeah. And so I might
I mean,
add here,
it should be revving her back up because she's like, wait a
yeah.
minute, why is this rich guy having a fancy party?
Yeah. Well, then I'd add, before she says gala, I'd add in here something about her inner thought. I'd move this inner thought, this didn't seem time for luxury, back to the top, and be like, man, this guy's really landing on thick. This really isn't the time for luxury. Gala, she said, and then it brings that like emotional flip a little harder. Does that make sense? Um, yeah, I think that was it. I think I said I want one more beat here at the end. I said with a fake laugh. Am I good to go, Kevin? Oh yeah, I just want a little bit more of a wrap up. So like, let's raise money for the islands. It's fancy dress, like Kane explains. You brought Hicks' house, is that correct? Oh, and here he's looking down at her chest again.
Yeah.
This is the place where he does it. I might put that in a couple times before we get here. We said put it once up above.
Yeah, and then
but
it's a long time before.
It's a long time before it comes back up. So I might do it a couple times. Your sources are as good as Handy, I said with a fake laugh. Am I good to go, Captain? So she gets out of here really fast, especially after she just like re-engaged her on the gala.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, one, she wants to leave, but now like she's got questions that she knows they're not going to answer now, right?
Yeah.
So she's out of there.
Yeah. So I'd give me that beat.
Okay.
I'd tell me that.
So
like
just, right.
I said with a fake laugh, I couldn't take this guy staring at my chest anymore. This isn't going anywhere. Am I good to go, Captain? Yeah. Right. Like, give us that like emotional move there. But yeah, all in all, man, I think it's a really great piece. Anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, the something you've been getting at for quite a while is putting the prose between the segments, which is hard for me because I like to break dialogue up with the prose in the middle.
Yeah.
To when I feel like people would be pausing anyway.
Yeah.
If they're not, if it's back and forth, then I don't. But the idea of moving it a little bit toward moving some of the filler that you want to say in between the segments and sort of defining what a segment is. There's way more segments in this piece than I would have thought.
You have a lot of small ones, which is nice.
Right.
You got a lot
but
of,
I sort of saw it as like a round robin, but for the reader, it's easier to have it more as a sort of distinct pieces. Even though they're all there and she turns from one to the other, they're still separate engagements.
Yeah, and
there's nowhere in here where there's three people jumping in at once.
No, and I would say when you have this kind of round robin conversation, the segment I think you're actually looking for is the emotional shifts in her, right? Like, because we only care about her emotional shift. So the emotional shifts in her is where I would chart the end of your segments in this piece. Yeah, I've been reading, as I read, really trying to study how like strong authors do this, like authors that I really respect play with these like segment transitions and emotional transitions and where they add exposition and where they don't. It is interesting to see, like I feel like the reason I want to put exposition at the end of a segment is to create that emotional beat. It's like creating that emotional turn. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. I was just pondering.
Well, in general, you're recommending explaining things to the reader more than I naturally do. But then one of my big mistakes with writing is assuming the reader understands something. So I think for me personally, I need to slow down and make sure that I'm what I think is an easy transition is not for somebody who is not me.
Yeah.
right? Who's not
Yeah.
writing the book. Um,
And it's
and
so
so,
it's a weird balance in that I think our natural inclination is to explain visuals and to explain like descriptions of physical things, whereas what we really need to be doing is just giving a sentence, a half sentence, just a quick pause of emotional content as opposed to like physical content. Does
right.
that make sense?
Yeah. And as opposed to just assuming the reader is going to figure out what the emotional
Yeah, because
content is.
I think that's so, I'm finding that really great authors. Well, like I was looking at David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest recently because I always pull it out because it's such a great study because there's no plot. It's just emotional scene after emotional scene. And something he does really well is he never leaves you questioning what your vehicle is feeling or what the other people are feeling, even though often in his scenes you have no idea where you are. You have no idea who's talking. You're like, I don't have any context for these people, but the emotional resonance is incredibly strong. So it's that, I like works like that where I can like be like, okay, we can eliminate everything but the dialogue to figure out what's going on. Like get rid of the plot. I think that's also why I like Sun Also Rises, because I'm like, the plot here isn't actually important. I can remove the plot and figure out why people still like this book. But yeah, anyway, it's just
Yeah, that is interesting because one of the things I have to be careful of with first person is you've got all the time in the world to explain,
yeah, yeah.
right?
And you have a
And
direct conduit from
and
the
it's
yeah,
and when I'm editing other people's work, I'm like, this is not where this goes,
yeah,
right? This is not where the 6 paragraphs of your character's childhood goes. Uh,
yeah,
but because it's first person, you can stop anytime and tell the reader anything that you want to. So
yeah,
I sometimes err to the other side
yeah. You
of
made me
taking it out. So
you made me cringe on that six paragraph comment because I'm like, can we get this down to a sentence? Like,
yeah,
can we do this in like 1.5 sentences? We don't need 6 paragraphs. Yeah.
yeah,
Anyway.
yeah, and from an editing standpoint, I'm always trying to, like we were talking about, using the descriptions of the room to tell you something about character,
Yeah.
which is something I'm really learning to do
Oh,
more and
yeah.
more. It was a new. It sounds stupid, but it was a really new idea for me. That
Yeah.
like
Yeah, me too.
if you're gonna bother to describe the room, use it
Yeah.
to play character. In the same way, like in the piece we were just working on, having Handy mention the gala, which is a huge plot point,
Yeah.
is so much more fluid than the first way I wrote it, which was like, oh, you might be interested in coming to my gala, you know.
Yeah. Insert
uh,
plot point here.
it's yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's when you're doing first person narration, I think you have to be really careful of oversharing.
Yeah, and I think my general rule for editing is like if you're describing something in first person narrative for more than 3 to 5 paragraphs, then you probably just need a scene.
Yeah,
I'm talking about a thing, right? Like we're
right.
characters are
Unless it,
discussing it.
yeah, yeah. I was
Yeah.
just working. I was just working with an author on this uh, because he wrote a very long, very prosy novel, and I was pointing at which ones should be scenes, and he didn't quite get it. But it's like, does a ton of time go by? Like, are you describing things that happen over 5 years? Then you don't need a scene,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
right?
Yeah. If you're
But if you're
summarizing,
but
yeah.
if you're telling me everything that happens in a 5 minute period, make it a
Yeah.
scene, and that really helped him out quite a bit.
Yeah. Have you read The Dutch House?
I haven't.
That I love that novel because it does what we're talking about, in that like I think it covers a lifetime, right? Like it's one of these literary fiction
Right,
novels that covers this guy's whole life.
right.
And I know when I would be writing this, I would have paragraphs and paragraphs of transition between moments trying to describe what happened from like when he got married to when he got divorced. We missed their whole marriage, right? Like in one scene. And I think he actually explains the character explains the divorce before he explains the marriage. Right. Like he's talking about, and like I would want to like preface this to like make it linearly logical. And there's none of them.
But does she lace info from the marriage like in throughout the book, or
Yeah, so it
yeah,
keeps coming back,
right,
but and the way she does it is the whole book, it's first person, and the book is this guy and his sister. It starts in the future. His guy and his sister pull up their car outside of this house and they smoke cigarettes in front of it. And as they're smoking cigarettes in front of this house, they have memories, but the memories are scenes, right? Like, so he, his first person is always in the future talking to you about what's happening. But again, like every time he starts a scene, I want inherently as a writer, I'm like, oh man, he really should set this up and give me like 3 paragraphs of where we are in his story. And I get like 3 exchanges into it, and I'm like, no, I got it. I didn't actually need
right.
that. Like I didn't need it. Yeah. So it's an interesting study in the like removing this exposition summaries of time that I think I would put in that are like 4 or 5 paragraphs where he's like, it doesn't, you'll get it.
Yeah.
You'll
That's,
figure it
I
out.
mean, that I've come to spend a lot of time in the past 5 years thinking about literary fiction, because it's what I always just called fiction, because that's
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
read, and I've always read sci-fi and mysteries and whatever. But
Hmm.
when I what I would call fiction is what you would think of as literary fiction, and um, those, those are the kind of things that not only I want to say get away with, but actually like make it rich and meaningful for me, that I
Yeah.
absolutely do not want in my thriller.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's, I mean,
Yeah.
absolutely do not want that in my
Yeah.
thriller. But if I'm reading literary fiction, I want layers and
Yeah.
things that you have to pull apart,
The weird
and yeah.
onion. Yeah. Yeah.
There, yeah.
But there's still techniques we can pull from that literary fiction into our thrillers that make our thrillers better, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
But like the biggest one for me is like, I'm noticing this more and more, recommending books to people when I'm selling books, is that um, the sort of hero's journey has taken center stage, in that we readers want to follow one character closely
yeah,
all the way through. And my favorite literary fiction is the opposite of that. And people, more and more people are like, it jumped around too much for me. I'm like, I
yeah,
loved it because it jumped around.
yeah, because it went
the
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Anthony Doerr book that came out last year, the oh, now I'm doing it, it's your fault,
I know.
I'm forgetting the
And
title.
there's no Tom to yell at you the name of the
I know,
title. Yeah,
Tom.
Tom. But
Anyway,
When Tom
yeah,
is the one
it
forgetting the title, there's no Tom to yell the title.
uh yeah, Cloud Cuckoo Land is the title.
Okay.
My brain just needs like 10 seconds to
Yeah,
searching.
yeah.
I need a little
Buffering.
circular, yeah,
Yeah.
buffering.
You get the little
uh
thing
that
that's like 3 lines with the
Right,
exclamation point.
that book
Yeah.
takes place in like the fall of Constantinople in 1500, and
Oof.
modern day United States, and the future on a spaceship.
Wow. Oh, nice.
And it doesn't tell it linearly, it jumps around, and it
Yeah.
is amazing book.
That's so
um
great.
there's so many books like that where, as a reader who doesn't have a lot of time, I'm like, and also someone who wants to recommend really good books. So like if I read an ace of a book, I'm like, great, I can sell a
Yeah.
shit ton of this. I'm like, oh, please stick the landing, please stick the landing, please.
Yeah.
And he totally sticks the landing, because one of the
That's
problems with
nice.
literary fiction is often they don't stick the landing.
Yeah,
They're
they
like,
just kind of
okay,
peter it
I'm
out.
done.
Yeah. They're like, and this we've discussed character growth enough at this point, so I'm just gonna kind of like leave you all sitting
Yeah.
here.
uh and that's a function of I think streaming TV and movies, and we've all come to expect things to have a structure that's more like a TV show,
Yeah, it's so
right?
we live in a weird storytelling time where like I think in the past it was like innovation happened at the written level and then moved to other forms,
Mhm.
but I feel like that's shifted.
Right. I
And
mean,
that
it's
yeah.
Sopranos, right? Like if Sopranos was literary fiction, that ending would bother nobody.
Yeah, you just be like, "Oh yeah, this is how it ended." Mad Men
Right.
too. You just
Right.
be like,
Like
"Oh yeah, this is how it ended."
we've seen that character arc. He's
Mhm.
in a different place than he started, and it's time to
Yeah,
go.
it's
And
time to
like,
go on.
not on it,
Yeah.
as a choice for a TV show, I was mystified by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
It's so funny.
so
It's we live in a weird time, man. where we're like, well, I think like you're writing comedy. I think like one of the hard things now about writing comedy, like as JP and I have tried to write nerds, one of the hard things is that like these comedies have become so much improv where you're getting like weird characters in a room and they're all just riffing off of each other, like The Office and the
Right.
Parks and Rec and the style. That's tough to write because you get like those big cast conversations like this one. You get like five weirdos in a room and you've got to track how everybody's doing and what everybody's, and it's like, oh man, this kind of situational comedy is way harder to do in the work in like on the page than it
Yeah.
is just to be like, and
Although,
now everybody riffs.
right. And TV shows always did that, right? Like
Yeah.
you think of like Taxi or WKRP
Yeah.
or whatever. That was the whole idea, was you bring a bunch of weirdos in a room.
Yeah.
But adventure action movies didn't used to do that, but Marvel totally. I mean,
Oh yeah.
That's what Guardians of the
That's
Galaxy
all it
is,
is.
right?
It's just weirdos
Uh,
saying weird things together. Yeah.
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 But to me, that connects a bit to what you talk about with like the character wheel and the voice modulation. And if you do your setup well enough, and this is something that I
Mm.
try to talk about in my book, is that uh, the action kind of writes itself, right? Like if you've
Yeah.
got two people who get mad in two very different ways, and you put them in a room and give them something mad about it, if you've created them clearly, the plot is gonna what happens is sort of gonna unroll,
Yeah. It works
right?
itself out.
You
Yeah.
you throw a bomb in the middle of the room, of a figurative bomb,
Yeah.
and just how the different people would react differently is actually going to fuel conflict
Yeah.
and
And
change. So,
there's your scene. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's no different than MASH or
Yeah. This is so
any of
true.
those awesome
Yeah.
sitcoms.
Yeah.
Um, all right, I'm sorry, I'm babbling because I could do this
Whatever,
all
dude.
day.
I can talk to you all day. Yeah.
Oh my god, I just one more thing. When I was working on I'm trying to work on a presentation for that'd be like the first half of my writing book
Oh, nice.
that I could give at libraries or whatever, and like
Yeah. Yeah.
how do you how do you prep,
Yeah.
and people, I know people still get upset when you're like, this is all, this is science, man. You're like,
Yeah.
come on, it's writing.
Yeah.
We were watching the live action Mulan. Two examples. One was watching the live action Mulan, and I had just read Start Your Novel in the Middle, and
Okay.
so I went exactly to the middle, like using the timer of the movie.
Yeah.
And Mulan is like lying in the wilderness, and she gets up and she takes off her male disguise to
Yeah.
and she's all by herself, so it's totally a personal choice, like it's
Yeah. Yeah.
her
Yeah.
emotional change in the movie. And I was like,
Yeah.
shit, man. And then the other was when I'm prepping for this thing on structure, like farces are great for structure, and I watched an episode of MASH from the first season, and this is like 5 episodes in, and they had nailed voice and character so
Oh
hard,
man, so great.
so fast. But
Yeah.
it's like, hey, there's the inciting incident, there's the escalating
Mm-hmm.
escalating complications
Yeah.
there. You don't have like a mirror moment, Dark Night of the Soul in MASH, but you do have the point where they have to decide that they're going to expose their fraud to save somebody's life, right? Like, are we
Yeah.
going to get in trouble for what we've been up to at the cost of, or are we going to let somebody die?
Yeah. And when they do land
23 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. And when they do land those Dark Nights of the Soul, they often land them with the characters you don't expect.
Yeah.
Like it's like Klinger having one.
Right.
Or it's like the weird voice character having one. Or it'll be like the Alan Alda character who doesn't care about anything. They'll give him like 45 seconds to just have a like devastating personal moment.
Yeah.
And when they do it, it just, because I used to watch, my mom loved MASH. I used to watch MASH with my parents all the time growing up. And that was, I still remember some of those expressions Alan Alda would give when he's having like a, because they're always joking about how he's like making liquor in his tent, like he and BJ Honeycutt have a like still in their tent in this Korean War.
Yeah,
But
but that was, I mean,
yeah,
power to him, like 5th episode, and they had every character nailed.
Every character
Just the
nailed.
voices were
Yeah.
just the stuff they do with the radar and
And the
Henry,
captain.
the captain, is
Yeah.
just
Amazing.
brilliant. And it's
Yeah.
all like in the background,
Yeah.
right?
And he's
Like,
like carrying that teddy bear around.
yeah.
Like it's such a great, yeah. But they'll have these moments though, like where they let Alan Alda take this thing that's a joke in that like still, and
Mhm.
they let Alan Alda just like sit in quiet and have a drink, and like you can just see on his face like pondering the horrors of war. And it's just this like it's quick. It's like
Yeah.
20 seconds. And but man, it nails. It like, yeah, super powerful. Anyway.
All right.
All right, man. I'm gonna stop the
Thank you.
recording.
That was
Yeah.
great.